Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Navina, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this roundtable on advancing innovation in green technologies and the circular economy in Malaysia, which is being held as part of the iGEM 2021. This session is jointly organized by the Malaysian Sustainable Finance Initiative, which is an initiative by Capital Markets Malaysia, the Ministry of Environment and Water Malaysia, and the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Centre. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to just make a couple of housekeeping announcements. This session will run for 2 hours and there will be no breaks in between. We will begin with welcome remarks and then a presentation, and we will end with a roundtable discussion. We're hoping that the roundtable discussion will be as interactive as possible. So if you do have questions, you will see at the bottom of your conference screen there is a question box. You simply have to click on the box, type in your question, and it will be fed directly to the moderator. So first off, ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to invite Dr. Nagulendran, who is the Deputy Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Water Malaysia, to deliver his welcome remarks. Dr. Nagu, the floor is yours.
Right. Thank you very much, Navina. Yang berusaha Puan Zalina Shamsudin, Capital Markets Malaysia, yang berbahagia Datuk-Datuk, Tuan-Tuan dan Puan-Puan. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and thank you for taking your time off and for being here at iGEM 2021, more specifically in our roundtable webinar. Navina said it's going to be a very interesting webinar. We will try, together with the panelists today, to make it as interesting and exciting as possible, advancing innovation in green technologies and circular economy in Malaysia. The topic that we are going to discuss this afternoon, I think, is very timely. As I see, we have experienced panelists to help us navigate through this very important topic. And as we wait through this pandemic, as we were chatting pre-conference, it has caused serious implications to many of us, to the community around us, to the general public. And I think we need to now collectively find ways to live in harmony with the environment, with nature. But in the urgent need in coping with this pandemic, we also need the urgency to address the many environmental challenges that we are jointly facing. To name a few: climate change, biodiversity loss, acidification, and of course, mismanaged plastics in the environment. As we know, we are hearing our colleagues in the US and northern part of America having heard heat wave, and in some parts of China and Germany, floods. And these things happen in a frequency of once in every 1,000 years. But scientists are telling us if our trajectory of greenhouse emission continues the way we are now, this could happen every 5 to 10 years, recurring every 5 to 10 years. Hence, it's obvious that the world needs to stick and act to the obligations and pledges made at the Paris Summit and the Paris Agreement. We know that decarbonization of energy sector alone is not enough to tackle climate change, for example. We need a transformation in the economy sector. We need to change our economy from a linear model to a more circular model for better efficiency and impact to the planet as well as our general well-being. According to a publication by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who has been working a lot on plastics, they claim that 45% of greenhouse gas needed for net zero can be reduced through circular economy. So the topic that we are discussing today is very, very important, especially for emerging developing countries like us. Hence, for Malaysia, I know my colleagues in the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, together with Economic Planning Unit, have started working on a project for a circular economy policy interventions at different levels. As for us at the Ministry of Environment and Water, we have had recently stakeholder discussion on a circular economy roadmap, very specifically looking at plastics. And we hope to launch it at this iGEM in October once it goes through the cabinet process. We need to take a whole-of-nation approach towards moving to a more circular economy. And we are fast reaching tipping points in many of it, from biodiversity loss to climate change and many others. But I think we can change the trajectory if we move to a more circular economy. And let's discuss together with the other panelists to see how we can do it in a more national setting. Back to you, Marina. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Nagu. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome Arina. Arina Kok is partner for climate change and sustainability at EY Malaysia, and she will be delivering a presentation on a snapshot of Malaysia's green and circular economy. Arina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Navina. First, I would like to thank MSFI, the Ministry of Environment and Water, as well as Green Tech for the opportunity to share the presentation today. I'll go straight. Today's focus is really on advancing innovation in the green technologies and the circular economy in Malaysia. Now, when we look at what is circular economy, it is an alternative to our current economic model of consumption, which is heavily reliant on the use of finite resources and the results of unnecessary waste. Now, what the circular economy embodies is the idea that the management of products, materials can be changed to make economic system more or less reliant on the extraction of virgin raw materials, deliver greater value for these materials, and reuse resources whenever possible. The combination focus on the resource efficiency, the use of renewable resources, and economic growth has inspired many policymakers and industry leaders to act. Now, this is the circular economy value chain, and we'll go through in detail in the next slide. So, given the 5 green growth opportunities outlined here from the Asian Development Bank implementing a green recovery in Southeast Asia report, we see that the efforts require more than $172 billion worth of capital expenditure, and this could create over 30 million jobs in ASEAN by 2030. Now, where we would like to highlight is this capital expenditure not only look at mechanisms that actually would help to recover to a green roadmap, but it does provide a statistics and focus on where the jobs would be in terms of whether it's in clean energy transition, the circular economy models, sustainable urban development and transport models, productive and regenerative agriculture, as well as health and productive oceans. So when we look at the circular economy and the waste hierarchy, we can see that the desirable stage at the top is essentially prevention. And there has been a significant amount of research that focuses whereby as you go down the trajectory to reuse, recycle, recovery, and disposal, it gets less and less desirable. Hence, a lot of the policies being developed globally are very much also focuses on prevention. And if you look at the right-hand side, the circular transformation, when you talk about moving up the waste hierarchy, it takes a significant amount of change in waste management towards the change in behavior to actually shift from this unsanitary landfill towards the various areas of moving up the waste hierarchy. So with this in mind, it takes more money to actually handle the unsanitary landfills as compared to, moving up towards the prevention cycle. So the idea really, the simplified mechanism is really to fix things right first at the most instance of the circular economy. Now, when we look at what the circular economy has driven in terms of the increasing economic values are the influence in the regulatory environment, the industries, and the societies. So we can see that a shift in the circular economy is not just an option, but an inevitable response to the world population, whereby the increasing prosperity and limited availability of natural resources is also a driving factor. So transition, it does involve great business chance, and it can create new employment opportunities. What I wanted to highlight here is our key statistics, whereby you can see that the circular economy could generate a net economic benefit of $2.2 trillion by 2030. This is in accordance to a research by Ellen MacArthur Foundation as well. And what we can see is on the other spectrum, we've seen the EU in as early as this year introduce a tax on the non-recycled plastic packaging waste, mandatory design measures, and recycled content requirements, which actually aims to drive revenue to actually drive the green economy as well for their region. So when we look at the regulatory action, it is one of the key drivers in driving the global circular economy. And we can see cut across all the continents, countries, including China, are looking at the circular economy within their legislation, looking at large-scale pilots and restriction on waste imports. In Malaysia, we also have the Malaysia Roadmap towards Zero Single-Use Plastic 2018 to 2030, which I'll go through as well in the next slide. But I think what we've seen is a global movement towards circular economy, and Malaysia has also put out that. Now, when we talk about circular economy and decarbonization, these are the 10 areas that we wanted to highlight. So the government has rolled out the Malaysia Shared Prosperity Vision, which continues to embed the UN SDGs, which will be operationalized through the 12th Malaysian Plan. We also have the roadmap on zero single-use plastics, as I mentioned. Business as well. MPC is developing the tool to help companies assess their maturity level of resource utilization, which will be adapted into an online system. Under the government, we have seen KASA and Dr. Nagulendran has mentioned as well. They are also considering the proposal for Climate Change Act and carbon tax for future investments. And in the Malaysia 2021 budget, it's aligned to UN SDGs for the first time, establishing a My SDG Trust Funds with an initial allocation of 20 million to encourage Malaysian companies to embrace sustainable goals. What we've seen also more recently is the announcement of the Low Carbon Sustainable City Master Plan, which will be allocating 35 million under the Low Carbon Catalyst Grant, GERA, to local authorities to drive climate change actions in the grassroots level. For a whole of government approach, we've seen Malaysian Climate Change Action Council, MyCAC, being the ultimate platform for setting direction, discussing climate change policies, actions, and driving growth, catalyzing green technologies and low carbon growth at all levels. Circular economy in Malaysia. Given that Malaysia has also pledged to cut its greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by intensity by 2030, as well as have 20% clean energy generation by 2025, excluding large hydro. These are the various focus areas in terms of the opportunities, focusing on renewable energies, energy efficiency in the green energy sector. Waste, we have the Waste Eco Park, integrate waste management, circular economy, recycling. We also have green building and electric vehicles. So this on the right-hand side is the government incentives, GTI, the Green Investment Tax Allowance, Green Income Tax Exemption, Green Income Tax Exemption, GITE solar leasing. And in terms of the waste management activities, companies can also request for pioneer status, as well as the investment tax allowance on qualifying capital expenditure. So when we look at what are the business drivers for circular transformation, the key stakeholders that's driving this is really on the client expectations, where we've seen more coming out with certain few key commitments on climate change, not just on their operations, but down the supply chain and value chain as well. There is also new business solutions, whereby product services and innovations are coming out with new digitally enabled product sharings, consumer preferences for green products as well. When we look at the other potential in terms of the cost and compliance, we see that there are volatility and increasing sourcing of cost. Hence, thereby, there are already growing solutions such as urban farming that is looking to actually solve the food security issues. And there's also new disruptive regulations that will actually be in the horizon, considering taxes, bans, cross-border taxes and obligations. And in terms of the corporate ambition, we're seeing that employee management are having stronger aspirations for a positive impact. And they're looking to see how the organizations are driving value in their business towards a longer term and meeting investors' changing and increasing these expectations as well. So when we look at the potential for circular economy and recycling, it's huge, because when we look at Malaysia, there is still quite a significant way to go. Malaysia currently is one of the top producers for fossil fuel plastic products, which is with a sales turnover of 48 billion ringgit Malaysia and 13.3 billion export in just last year, 2020. Now, what we've seen the equation here is, while we've seen scheduled waste generated in 2019 was 4 million tons, we've also seen that the total this waste of country is increasing by 20% during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is in relation to the Department of Statistics Malaysia. What we've also seen is the recycling rate in Malaysia was at 28.1% in 2019. And this was predicted to achieve 40% by 2025. However, not all plastic products can be recycled. So some of them are disregarded by the waste collectors because of various factors, such as hazardous or economic reasons. Now, given these two statistics, we need to do more in terms of recycling. And it must start with a redesign of the business models where all products manufactured are easily recyclable, repurposed, or reused, utilizing sustainable sources of raw materials. All stakeholders need to then take a step back and look at what Malaysia does best, improve the system and technology so that the valorization of the product is also optimized. So we talked about the Malaysia roadmap towards zero single-use plastics. So this is the roadmap that has been outlined, and it cuts across different time frame and the time bound as well. I wanted to come to this slide because when we look at the various stages of implementation, while there has been discussions on focusing on the plastics, there is also an increased coverage or expansion of scope, which I wanted to highlight coming in 2022 to 2025, that focuses, expanding the scope to cover not just plastic straws, but also food packaging, plastic films, cutleries, food containers, cotton buds, polybags, and slow-release fertilizers. So we know that this is within the plan. Now, looking at not just what the regulators are driving, we also want to understand, what are corporates leading towards when it comes to the circular economy. So this is a case study where we brought, to have that overview, whereby we see Petronas Chemical Group spearheading the new plastic economy initiative. This was from their 2019 report, whereby they are also working in collaboration with the Malaysian government, the NGOs, the industry community to look at the effective waste management and innovative technology. And this is really to look at how to convert plastic waste into circular feedstock and alternative energy. So I won't go into much details, but you can actually read more on this from their website, but it focuses on innovation, infrastructure, education, and cleanup. Second case we wanted to bring about is Green Tech Public Solar EV charging stations. This is an ongoing initiative in Malaysia, whereby in 2018, Green Tech has also completed the first phase installation of 10 and in across EVs charging stations in Langkawi. And I think it has now increased to a higher number. And these are also focused on the strategic routes that are frequented by taxi operators and tourists on the island. So now phase 2 is actually shifting towards having the decarbonization of EV charging infrastructure with solar PV and EV charging stations as well. So this is where there are killer partnerships with Plus Malaysia, and they are looking to also enhance the partnerships as well to enhance on this area as well. This is not the only projects, as we have seen in recent months as well. TNB has also worked together with DHL to come up with EV charging stations as well for corporates with a new key business model. Now, when we look at the SEA circular project, Penang Green Council under the Ministry of Environment and Water also have collaborated with the UNEP and the coordinating body of the Seas of East Asia to implement a regional project called Reducing Marine Litter by addressing the management of the plastic value chain in Southeast Asia. So this is supported by the government of Sweden as well via the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. And what we can see is the focus of the aim is to reduce the adverse impact of plastic pollution on the marine environment by transforming plastic management and preventing waste leakage. So what's worth to highlight is it takes quite a significant amount of effort, and hence collaborative partners and strategic partnerships are key in actually driving the impact. And to a certain extent, the objective is also, the output is actually outlined in 4, but I think where I wanted to highlight is it does provide and strengthen the evidence base for informed decision making to address marine litter by building national capacities to monitor the plastic material flows and assess waste leakage hotspots in line with the global best practices. So now, when we look at what are others doing globally, we wanted to bring a case from Circular Capital, who is actually dedicated to finance innovation, companies and infrastructure that prevent ocean plastics and advance their circular economy. Now, what they have done for this PE at the growth stage is they have actually invested in Lucro Plasticycle, a homegrown Indian manufacturing company specializing in recycling difficult to manage flexible plastics for its own production and sale as high quality commodities to other facilities across the country. Now, why this case is important is because the case is really having them to be involved in every step of the process. Lucro is able to create a circular economy for plastic by making the recycling and manufacturing of plastics more efficient and high quality. It also works to support the livelihoods of local communities by providing reliable income to the informal sector. And when we look at the other side of things is the financing of the sustainable finance that actually drives this as well. And what are the frameworks that are being looked at? And what are the primary impacts and outcomes that are being measured, such as how many jobs it has created, what are the increased access to financial services, how do they conserve land and ecosystem and natural resources. So these are the various aspects when we talk about impact investments. The second case I wanted to build from the global perspective is one from UK, where they are building a circular economy in the construction and infrastructure, where the Thames Tideway Tunnel is currently under construction. It's a 25 kilometer tunnel running through the tidal section of the River Thames through the central London. Now, the tunnel will actually capture and store raw sewage and rainwater discharge that currently overflow into the river. I think what we wanted to highlight on this is really looking at the concept and the way that they have looked at. The objective of this project is to design change that result in a 16% savings on the volume of concrete used across the central section. So this project, again, was delivered by collaborative partners. And I think what they have reported is on the right-hand side. The key impact is 1,379 tons of carbon were avoided through the circular design change. And when we look at the details of this in further details is when we look at the various aspects of this, how when they design out the carbon, it helps to achieve a significant cost and the embodied carbon savings as well. So when we look at looking at the overall output, this has resulted in really the significant reduction in material used. And it has also provided, that the tunnel reinforcement is saved 2,000 tons of materials, equivalent to 31% of the original design. And there is also substantial labor cost savings through improved productivity due to reduced congestions. So this is where it demonstrates that having a sustainable innovation at the design stage can both support the environmental and financial value within that infrastructure project. So the other part I wanted to highlight is on hydrogen. This is essentially a gaining topic that we see in our globally, as well as it's not something new in Malaysia. We already have the hydrogen discussions and certain outlines of program in Malaysia. If you go to the MIDA website, so hydrogen has a huge potential to help advance the decarbonization of energy, transportation, and industrial market. And hydrogen is one of the most abundant chemical elements on the planet, characterized by the low density and weight. It can be used both as an energy vector, such as methane, and as gas used in industries. And compared to other fuels, it's able to drive the economy towards a sustainable future. However, I think with this, there is also a number of research that needs to be done to bring it to a more cost-efficient mechanism. So a lot of the large organizations now are focusing on this, given the solutions is essentially driving green solutions and looking to decarbonize some of the more difficult to decarbonize sectors, which includes the other steels, the mills, and the transportation for long haul as well. So this is an overview of the hydrogen value chain. I won't go through it in detail, but essentially it does shows the potential where it can actually cover not just the generation, but the conditioning, the storage or distribution, and also has a wider range of application in terms of power generation and fuel for transportation. So this will actually be the focus areas for most oil and gas utility and energy players as well in the coming decade, aside from the other solutions of renewable energy and storage solutions. This is also the detail where we talk about the application of the hydrogen value chain. It does look at the further deep dive into the aspects of electrolysis process, the other areas of storage, as I mentioned, and the other technologies in terms of transportation as well, how it would actually support the transportation sector to actually decarbonize. Now, looking at the policy and corporate support, it is really accelerating dramatically, not just in Malaysia. And what we can see here is to streamline the transition. A lot of organizations in 2020, we've seen that countries that represent 17.5% of global GDP have launched hydrogen strategies or targets. These are the three continents and three countries that we want to highlight that actually have a clearer directive on their roadmap, which is Europe, Germany, and US, whereby they have also outlined the amount of budget, the dedicated governance and funding structures, as well as for US, they have come up with a 4-phase on how they are organizing their roadmap on hydrogen strategy up until 2023, 2026, and as well as 2030. So now when we look at the collective opportunities and action towards advancing green growth and the circular economy, we've also wanted to highlight my last slide, the collective opportunities of where it can actually drive collaboration and where the focus areas are. So when we look at the government and policymakers, we've talked about the various policies that has been rolled out. Where the focus areas would be is to increase on the R&D on alternatives, having increased communication and platforms to actually discuss the potentials, educate the public awareness. Whereas for financial institutions is really to drive and facilitate financing into the green economy, drive the early stage and growth stage investing, provide lending to finance the circular economy. NGOs can actually support to actually provide a system level solutions and provide the expertise and on sustainable resource use as well. For the corporates and private sector, they can actually look to also drive business solutions that actually addresses the low carbon sector, as well as looking at the resource utilization at the most early design stage. So what we know is a green recovery is critical for us as a nation to reduce the risk of future pandemics, mitigate and adapt to the impact of climate change, create jobs, increase competitiveness within the region or globally, and meet the sustainable development goals. Implementing a green recovery will essentially require mainstreaming environmental resilience in policy making, undertaking policy interventions in the green opportunities, and identifying sources of finance for green growth. Now, according to the research by Ellen as well, the circular economy financing market is really taking off. And the past 18 months have seen a steep increase in the creation of debt and equity instruments related to the circular economy. The total amount of assets managed through public equity funds increased 6-fold since the beginning of 2020 from $0.3 billion to over $2 billion. Now, with billions of people still excluded from the access to decent work, opportunities, and goods and services, a special breed of innovators called impact or social entrepreneurs are coming up with better answers to the global problems and driving progress. While many of these companies are involved in the circular economy, they are niche businesses. Investors community can also play a key role in helping this to scale effective solutions. So with that, moving to a circular economy, it will not just reduce reliance on virgin raw materials and reduce waste in landfills. It will also reduce dependency on imports, lead to cost savings of raw materials, drive job creations in remanufacturing, and to fully transition into and realize the potential of circular economy, there must be a commitment and sustained efforts by everyone and all the stakeholders. Now with that, thank you, Navina, and I'll pass back the floor.
Thank you so much for that, Arina. That was a really comprehensive presentation. We do have a question from the audience, from someone in the asset management sector for Arina. His question is polyethylene P plastic and PET plastic different? According to a response, the problem lies in the waste management where not all of P plastics are circled back to the recycling processes. By nature, P plastic are highly recyclable. Arina, do you have a comment to that?
I think there are still quite a number of research, but I think it still falls under the realms of the plastics. So it comes back to the usage and what are the elements of the P plastics. So different jurisdictions have different sort of the way they look at the categorization. And I think this is where a lot of the specialists in the plastic sector and the innovation sector can then help to also better define what are those that can be recycled or reused, or it will end up to go to the landfill. So it comes back to the purpose and the fit for use if it's supposed to go back to the quality of recycle.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Arina. So for those of you who would like to access Arina's presentation slides, they will be made available on the Malaysian Sustainable Finance Initiative platform after the event. But next up, I am very, very pleased to welcome our panelist and moderator, from renewable energy companies, from green tech, oil and gas. We also have public sector representation as well as stakeholder groups. And so I'd like to now introduce your moderator for this session. Zalina Shamsudin is General Manager of Capital Markets Malaysia, and I will hand over to Zalina to start the session.
Okay, thanks, Navina. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Arina, for your comprehensive presentation. But I think the question that most of us have in our mind when we see this is, how is that relevant to us in Malaysia? If you look at the data in terms of GHG emissions, it cannot be denied that the usage of energy is the biggest contributor to GHG emissions. So logically, the right path forward is just to be more efficient in the type of energy we use, more efficient in how much energy we use. And so then the question is, how relevant is circular economy? Why should we as a country be focused on circular economy and instead be focusing on our energies in terms of improving our energy efficiency? And therefore, the ROI coming back from energy efficiency would be higher if relative to circular economy. But so on that basis, I'd like to invite Wendy. Wendy is the country head of transaction banking at Standard Chartered. Standard Chartered came out with a report called Carbon Dated. And this report is interesting is because given the policies for net zero in other countries and other regions, Malaysia will be impacted, and our policies and our action on circular economy is going to impact our export potential. So without much ado, Wendy, if you could please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about Standard Chartered's policies and responsibilities in the space of sustainable financing. And if you could give us a quick overview on the report, it'd be appreciated.
Sure. Thank you, Zalina. Thanks, everyone. Good afternoon, and I'm very happy to be a panel speaker today and to a very, very important topic that we want to discuss, right? So as Zalina mentioned earlier, yes, I'm from Standard Chartered Malaysia, Berhad. I'm the country head of transaction banking, and my career actually goes around transaction banking, relationship management for almost 20 years now. And now it's even more important with adding the sustainable element into the transactions, right? So Zalina mentioned earlier about a report that was recently launched by Standard Chartered Bank. That's called the Carbon Dated report. So I just wanted to maybe give a feel of how this report was put together and some of the sub findings that we established from the report. So basically, this is a report to really look at sustainability really look at the resilience in the supply chain, which bodes very well with our topic today on the circular economy, right? So how this study came together, we actually got a group of global opinion research. I think there was about 400 over top leaders in sustainability from various multinationals and large corporates. And what we did was to get their opinions and put that together in a economic extrapolation and really how to then quantify the impact that this has to the suppliers and through some of the start findings and some of the statistics that we got from this report, this research, right? Firstly, I guess what's important to note is that about 3/4 of large corporates and multinationals today, emission actually comes from or generated from their supply chain. Therefore, I think about 2/3 of the MNCs are now actually targeting very hard to look at their supply chain emission as sort of like a first step towards their transition towards net zero. And as a result of this, we also did find that about more than 50% of these large corporates will very, very soon look at replacing emerging market suppliers who are not within these emission goals towards developing market suppliers. So I guess some of the very key net zero dates also coming up from this is actually in 2020, there's already been a survey that almost 15% of large corporates and multinationals, they have already started removing their non-sustainable suppliers. And by 2025, I think about 78% of these multinationals will then be already removing those suppliers that are not positively linked to the carbon emission. And we also know that by 2050, almost 96% of multinationals already plan to have reached the zero emission. So I guess we need to really strive together towards converting as many companies in Malaysia as possible, right? To move from this, from operating from the linear model that they are now and shift towards this circular paradigm.
Thank you, Wendy. Sorry, is there more? Sorry, Wendy.
No, that's all for now.
Okay, so just to give context so that everyone we're all on the same page. So when you talk about disclosures, I think at the end of the day, there are 3 types of disclosures. There's scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 1 is the kind of GHG emissions you produce as a company. Scope 2 is the kind of emissions that you produce from your production cycle. And scope 3 is the emissions that your value chain, your suppliers, your vendors contribute in terms of GHG. So historically or to date, we've all been focusing on scope 1 and scope 2, how much each company produces in terms of carbon emissions. And that is how, regulations or other organizations view their partners or their supply chain in terms of how sustainable are you as a corporate. So now, because of regulations and for the push towards net zero, it's now trickling down to what is your value, what is your supply chain producing and contributing to GHG. So this is really critical. I think historically we've focused on the first layer of companies in terms of their contribution to GHG. And now we're starting to see that the whole value chain is important. And how this is important for us in Malaysia is the value chain here, we're talking about the SME community. So, a lot of focus has been on getting the big boys to be more energy efficient. But I think as a country, we need to start seeing that it's everyone's responsibility to be energy efficient because it affects different segments of the economy, all segments of the economy. So it's not just the oil and gas industry, it's just not the E&E industry, but everyone has a role to play. So on that note, I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to go back to the basics. I think most of us here and in the audience are familiar with renewable energy. We're all gone down that path of understanding solar energy. We're all comfortable with that. So let me just call on Davis. Hi, Davis. If you could just give us a quick overview, Davis, on where the solar energy industry is today, because we've done a lot in that space from a policy point of view, from private sector participation, the incentives are in play. We've got all the various technical expertise ramping up in Malaysia. If you could give us an overview of where we are today in Malaysia in that space, please.
Right, thanks, Zalina. I think I just kind of share a little bit of experience of how this renewable energy industry has been growing in Malaysia since 2012, since the FIT time. To directly answer the question just now, we are actually around 6%, I think about 2 gigawatt of RE capacity installed in Malaysia right now. So which we're actually heading to, that excluding about large hydro, because our statistic number recently changed because from 20% of excluding large hydro to 31% of including large hydro, which large hydro has the Malaysia total capacity is about 18 gigawatt capacity. So large hydro probably operating at about 5.8 gigawatt capacity in Malaysia for East Malaysia and Peninsular Malaysia. I think Peninsular Malaysia maybe is about 2-point-something gigawatt. So that kind of capacity actually tell us that we have still a long way to go to reach that 31%. But with what we have already issued out or given the quota out to the RE capacity in Malaysia, which you can see that I think just now presented with RE, the NEM program. In the past, we have FIT program, we have SALCO program, of course, LSS program as well. Then we are actually, I think from the statistical number, we probably only need another 1.2 gigawatt of capacity to be awarded to reach the 31%. To my perspective, I think we actually can do more as a Malaysian in terms of our industry capacity, the finance. I think the market demand. I can say the market demand in Malaysia for RE is much stronger than what the policy has been given. One of the very strong indicator for commercial industrial segment, which when we said about this RE100 company, when they want their supply chain or adopt RE renewable energy in their operations, one of the program that you can do it in Malaysia is definitely the NEM program, the 300 megawatt of NOVA program that being pushed out by the government in 1st of April, which we finished at 500 megawatt in NEM 2.0 last year. And we have 3 months that there is no new quota for any industrial player to install solar capacity or a solar capacity. So, and in 1st of April, government finally pushed out, the ministry finally pushed out the 300 megawatt for commercial industrial, we call NOVA program. And that program, 300 megawatt, supposed to stand until end of 2023 to finish to serve for the few years up to 2023. And it's finished on probably, I think I remember 1st of April or 1st of July or 2nd of July for the 300 megawatt application. So you can see Malaysian, whether it's the FDI company or Malaysian local company, the industrial demand for renewable energy, it is so high. We finished the 300 megawatt quota until 2023 in 3 months' time. So that's how hungry is the industrial market to renewable energy project right now. Okay. And I think I give a little bit of a high level numbers that how the market is and where are we right now.
Thanks, Davis. Just for the audience's knowledge, Davis is the CEO of SolarVest, and SolarVest was recently listed on the ACE market. And SolarVest focuses on turnkey engineering, procurement, and construction, and a commissioning and service provider in the solar energy space. Davies, I would just like to ask you one question. So I get the impression that you're saying that policy, the minute they start opening up more quota system, then the pent-up demand will be met. But assuming that you are given 2 hours to be in charge of the solar industry today, we give you 2 hours. What are the top 2 things that you can possibly fix or you can possibly push forward to get this growth to grow? Because we're at 6%. And, you know, assuming that we want to hit our targets in the next 3 years, what are the other factors that we can do quickly to cause this shift?
Okay, that's very good questions. I think with what we're having right now, they are good policy. Of course, I'm not saying like our Ministry of Government not doing a good policy. The LSS program is good, the NM program is good, but it's just not. It can be better. Okay, so one of the things that we did not do, we did not push it enough, is on to open up the renewable energy market. In fact, what we do in NEM orders to solve the self-consumptions, and we call it distributed energy behind the meter program. It is good, but it's too small. And government always say that, okay, we can't subsidize too much and all this, that we agree to that. But with the LCOE that solar energy able to do now, we actually don't need the government to subsidize for the program. So you just need to liberalize the program, that let the market to decide what price they want to pay. And end of the day, the energy industry, infrastructure industry, it is a policy driven. We can't just do it and then connect to the grid. We can't. We need the authority, the regulator to allow us to do it. And do we need subsidies from the regulator or our government to do it? No, we don't. We just need the policy to do it.
Okay, that's a great...
We need to open up the policy for all the energy player, renewable energy player to participate in supplying renewable energy to the Malaysian market.
Okay, great. Thank you, Davis. I think that's a refreshing view, because generally I find in my experience, whenever we have roundtable discussions with policymakers, the general feedback is more incentives, more support.
Yeah, it is wrong. You know, I just take maybe about 30 seconds to... I attend the National Interconnections Lab, and all the big telco players still have a misconception that as long as you can sell cheaper than TNB to us, we'll buy the energy. Now I just say we can sell any cheaper. I can give a discount from TNB rate if you want it. But they thought they're gonna buy more expensive green energy. That's completely wrong.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much for that. On that note, I'm going to invite Datuk Khairuddin. Datuk Khairuddin is the chairman of the Asia Pacific Biogas Alliance. So historically, I think when we talk about renewable energy, and given the demographics of Malaysia as a tropical country, your immediate thought process is solar. I'd like to invite Datuk to give us a view on biogas and biomass, and how that is also a viable alternative renewable energy in Malaysia, and what's happening in that space in Malaysia. Datuk, thank you for joining us, Datuk.
Thank you, Zalina. Hello, Doctor, and all the panelists, plus all the audience. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Datuk Khairuddin. Currently, I'm the chairman of the Asia Pacific Biogas Alliance. The reason the APBA was formed is an informal alliance of all the industry players throughout the region of Asia Pacific, whereby we, in the biogas sector, we collaborate with other people, industry players throughout the region, to compare and to give suggestions on how to improve the biogas development in our country. In Malaysia, my company, what do? We are a developer of biogas in Malaysia under the FIT, whereby we are a one-stop center. We are the FIT holder. We develop our biogas plant, whereby we invest, we build our biogas plant, and we operate the biogas plant. At the same time, we are also doing biogas projects in Indonesia, but it's more on EPCC basis. In reference to the question by Zalina just now, I think one thing about Malaysia, we are very blessed, whereby we have so many palm oil plantation areas in Malaysia, and we have so many palm oil mills available. So in Malaysia, and even I could say in Indonesia, even Southern Thailand, with this blessing of you are having so many palm oil plantations and palm oil mills availability, one very important aspect is whatever the residue, whatever the waste that comes out from the palm oil mills can be utilized as a source of biogas. So when you go to a palm oil mill, usually you have the wastage from a palm oil mill, whether it's a biomass product or it's a biogas product. For biomass, for example, in Malaysia, one critical and one issue that we are having is the availability of feedstock and continuous feedstock. Because as we understand, biomass in Malaysia is something physical, whereby you have alternatives. So much so that the supply of biomass feedstock is not certain. So let's say if you are doing a biomass project and you want to sign a PPA with the government and with TNB for, let's say, 20 years, 21 years, may not be so easy. One, the investment cost is big. Secondly, to get the continuous supply is also a bit more challenging. But let's say if you talk about biogas, our feedstock in Malaysia are usually, we use the palm oil mill effluent. Traditionally, palm oil mills in Malaysia, the residue from the palm oil mills are always discharged into rivers by way of traditional method. But that is where the regulation, even certification bodies worldwide, they require certain standards to be complied. And with that, the government insists on the palm oil mills to have biogas system. Rather than you depend on traditional system, you need to be more systematic by installing biogas plant. So initially in Malaysia, as let's say we talk about 10 years ago, all, for example, large MNCs and listed companies who are involved in plantations, they build biogas plant more in order to comply with the regulation by MPOP and DOE. But since SEDA introduced the FIT scheme in 2011 under the Act, then it incentivized the players, whereby not only the large corporations are involved, but you also get smaller SMEs to be involved as expert in biogas. Currently, from my understanding, we have around more than 450 palm oil mills in Malaysia, and the ones which is equipped with biogas, I can assume must be only about 20 to 30%. So the upside in Malaysia for people to be involved in this industry, to do biogas and to get the monetary return for us, and at the same time to comply and give greater assurance in terms of the pollution. Because by having the biogas plant, one, you are minimizing, one is the wastewater pollution. Secondly, even in terms of the odor, and thirdly, in terms of the greenhouse effect. So by having a biogas plant, one, you can ensure compliance. Secondly, you can ensure in terms of the spillover effects of the projects. For example, because biogas plants are usually located outside in more rural areas, so it gives employment opportunities to people. And thirdly, it incentivizes people to be involved to get the profit for the stakeholders. So I would say, Zalina, this is one critical aspect. I mean, usually when people talk about RE, they always talk about solar and hydro, but actually we have readily available biogas plant, not say biogas plant, palm oil mills, which are suitable to do biogas plant, which is ready to be tapped in Malaysia.
Okay. Thank you so much, Datuk. The interesting thing here that the impression that I'm getting from both what you have said and what Davis has said is, it is still finance that is driving the decision. So Arina mentioned just now that it should be our behavior, our recognition that climate change is a risk. It's a significant risk that all of us, not only the government, but the private sector needs to take a role. But the impression I'm getting is, and let's debate that. Is the private sector recognizing, yes, climate change is important, yes, we need to look at it, but bottom line is, because of the value chain of finance, the financial returns of any project is still the defining decision-making point. And so climate change is still a nice to have. It's not become a reality that we all need to face and that we need to address as soon as possible because it's going to impact our finances. So on that note, I think Pramod, I'd like to invite you to the discussion. Pramod is the CEO of RAM Sustainability and the Deputy CEO of RAM Ratings. Pramod has done significant amount of work on this. So Pramod, how I would like you to answer this is, assuming we put our finance hat on, the reality of stranded assets. Okay, I think the audience, I'd like you to sort of explain to the audience is in the sense that stranded assets is a reality. It's not a long-term reality, but it's a medium-term reality that's going to come in place because of policies in other countries, the call for net zero, the change in technologies. All of us, the financial sector and the private sector players across all segments of the economy, are going to be facing the risk of stranded assets. Could you give us your view from a rating point of view or your sustainability point of view, please?
Okay, thanks, Zalina. I've been listening to all the other panelists, and one important area actually is pricing. Essentially, we're all talking about this risk, climate change, stranded assets, all the areas that we generally lumped together previously as qualitative risk, but essentially it has to go into pricing. If you are giving out a loan or you are funding something, if that risk is there, it must be covered in pricing. But at the same time, it also has to be looked at from the perspective of if you are in a polluting sector and you have a risk of your assets being stranded, or those risks are attributable to your industry, then the financiers or the investors need to take that into account. And I'll go slightly outside that question now. I think what makes a big difference to the financiers in understanding or taking this risk seriously would be policy direction, and even from the perspective of tax. So if the financiers get a feel that the government is going to tax certain sectors and support certain sectors with maybe lower tax rates, then that's a very strong signal. And we've been talking about change, it's not happening fast enough, all these things. You need something that pushes people to move a particular direction. It's not just people know it's the right thing to do to go green, but they will move when it's cheaper to do it. They will move if it's more expensive to stay and do what they've always been doing. So I will always go back to this point on pricing. It has to blend into the cost of financing. So if you're doing something, all things being equal, let's say the credit risk being equal, if you're doing something green, it has to be reflected somewhere. And that, for me, it's all about pricing in those risks, Zalina.
Okay, thanks a lot, Pramod. So Dr. Nagu, I'm going to put you in the hot seat now. I think everyone has sort of used the word policy in their comments so far. And as Pramod said, I think there's much discussion amongst the stakeholders, the converted, who want this to move forward, that why don't we start imposing punitive measures to force behavior, to change behavior? rather than providing a facilitative framework and letting the economy move in that direction out of their own will. Like Pramod says, it depends on pricing. Is it cost efficient? Is it worth my time and my investment? And given the fact that this is a public good, if you look at it, climate change is a public good. The government has a bigger role to play in this space. One is, do you agree with that? Two is, do you feel that Malaysia needs punitive measures to get this journey moving faster?
Thank you, Zalina. Yes, just to address these questions on punitive measures, I think many people have been speaking about carbon taxes, things of that nature. So we are in initial phase of discussions with the Ministry of Finance on looking at carbon tax and also ETS systems moving forward. But what we are doing now is we're coming up with a carbon market, a voluntary carbon market, which I think recently we had some stakeholder engagements, and I think some of you were also there. And from there, we hope to move towards a kind of cap and trade system. Because you see, as you correctly put it, Zalina, I mean, many countries in the West are now coming with border tax adjustments, and the study by Standard Chartered, which we had an opportunity to deep dive a bit further. So it's inevitable that slowly we will be funneled towards coming up with, I wouldn't say the word punitive maybe is a bit too heavy and it may scare the industry. I'll say some strong facilitative, some strong nudging by finance mechanisms to get the industry to move towards a more carbon friendly and a green pathway. But I think what's also really important is we are trying to derive experience from other sectors. So for example, the plastic sector, which I'm quite familiar with, the user pay principle has been quite successful in many countries. I think many countries inspired this whole user pay 20 cents per bag from the island plastic tax, which they managed to see a 97% reduction. And our colleagues up north in Penang have been very successful. Ever since they came up with the user pay principle, they managed to reduce quite significantly the usage of plastic, and they got a whopping 9 million ringgit. And this is good because the Penang model, the 20 cents does not go back to the retailer, it goes to the state government. State government can then use the money to betterment of the environment and the social well-being. So we have got a paper recently adopted by the government, and we are mainstreaming it to all state governments to follow a similar process. In fact, this morning we were with the state government of Kedah, talking to them on charging this 20 cents or more and channeling it to a fund which can be used to make the environment better. But I think the issue here is also we are very encouraged looking at industry getting together to move this process. So you're correct. We have Maria. Maria is Malaysian Recycling Alliance. I always get that sometimes wrong. Malaysia Recycling Alliance. They are the big boys. Yeah, they're big boys.
Yeah.
But what we have done in KASA is we've got something to complement this process called MASPA, Malaysian Sustainable Plastic Alliance, where we want the big boys and the medium scale industry, which make nearly 99% of our industry, to be together. And I think this changes that will happen at a global scale will cascade to the big boys, and the big boys then, it will be inevitable that the small and medium scale industry will need to change. And I think we need this hand holding. So we're very encouraged with the industry wanting to change. And we hope this Maria and MASPA could work together in the years to come to make the economy more circular. And I think initiatives towards that is happening by having targets on how much percentage of material in a product will be from circular economy sources or recycled sources. So this kind of targets, which is industry defined, will be much easier to do rather than the government going behind them with a rotan and say that every packaging now for a shampoo bottle must be 100% recycled. But if it's industry defined, because they're also looking at their market opportunities, it'll be very useful. So these are probably some steps that Malaysia is taking, but it's in the works that soon things like carbon tax and all that will be mainstream. But I like Pramod's point, and also we need to look at the issue in a more bigger context. Our utility prices are one of the cheapest in the region. I used to joke with some people that petrol prices in Malaysia are cheaper than a mineral water bottle. So we really need to look at this whole ecosystem very carefully and introduce the kind of incentives or disincentives in the right time. So I'll stop there for now and maybe take on more questions later on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Nagu. And so I would like to go back to this point. I think, how do we make sure that the industry recognizes climate change is not only just a need to have because it's the right thing to do, but to realize that it creates financial opportunities. It can provide us a source of financing or funding. It can help us generate revenue like the Penang government did, or it can create jobs. It can make you more cost efficient and more efficient in your I'm just going to say cost efficient again. Going to make you more cost efficient in the way you run your production cycles and stuff like that. On that point, I would like to invite Aaron. Aaron, could you please tell us a little bit about what iHandal does and how beyond solar and beyond biogas, there are other ways that companies can become more cost efficient in terms of their energy emissions?
Sure, Zalina. So when people talk about sustainability or green tech in general, I think almost everyone forgets energy efficiency. I think whenever we introduce ourselves green tech, they immediately jump to solar, right? Which is the primary focus right now, right? From a policy point of view and from a market point of view. So even with the falling costs of renewables and batteries now, which I mean is working well with government incentives to spearhead, emissions reduction in both energy generation and transport, cutting back emissions in buildings and industries in general remain without much significant progress, right, globally. What that means is all this clean energy that we're focused on generating is potentially, should not just potentially, but it's actually just being wasted by customers, some literally down the drain, right, as we've seen in the industries that we support, which can really easily be addressed through technology that helps customers or consumers consume that energy smarter and more effectively. The IEA, so the International Energy Agency, right, just since we are looking at global authorities in this space, has already concluded that without energy efficiency gains, electricity demand growth would make it much harder for renewables to displace fossil fuel models. A lot of models for emissions reduction forget about the increase in demand when they plot emissions reduction, right? And they forget that as you're increasing demand in tandem with adding renewable energy, it doesn't, if you forget the growth portion, it doesn't mean that your emissions are reducing. So what iHandle actually does is we enable our clients to recycle, just like when people are recycling waste from their processes, we raise something that's abstract that you can't see, which is wasted thermal energy, right? And reuse that energy back into one's operation to reduce further energy draw, right? As well as detect energy leakages. So what that means is we help the clients to get bottom line savings at the end of the day, and that savings helps them to invest in other areas of the businesses, which is really important in a pandemic like this, right? Where fixed costs like energy is a key focus for businesses, and also help them, most importantly, a lot of people don't realize that there's productivity gains as well that they could not have gained just because of the prohibitive cost of cooling or heating, right? And we've actually helped customers, cut back on employee turnover, hardship allowances by actually cooling down a factory floor from 40 to 28 without using any energy, right? And actually improving yield, right? So these are just some of the examples that energy efficiency can actually help the industry as well.
So Aaron, in terms of your clients, would it be fair to say that it's a mix of both large corporates, MNCs, medium-sized corporates? Do you also have clients in the smaller size, the SMEs?
Yeah, so we have clients that range from, I think, the largest glove producers, right, globally, as well as food manufacturers. So we have that end of the scale. We also work with commercial buildings, so a lot of regional hospitality and healthcare brands, right, across Southeast Asia as well as Europe and the US that use us. And since the pandemic, we've actually gone into even retail and homes, which is something we're launching to actually help clients. So we want to make sure it's an end-to-end. We're actually helping out everyone that needs assistance right now in this space.
Okay, thanks a lot, Aaron. So on that note, I'm mindful, Charlotte and Faroze, I will get to you soon very quickly. I'd like to raise a question to Bikesh. So Bikesh, we've heard about policies, we've heard about what should be done, what could be done, what is being done. Can you tell us a little bit about, case studies that you have seen of SMEs or companies coming to you on your ECF platform to raise financing because they're part of a circular economy or they're just sustainable? And it'll be good, sort of a best case study, if you could share with us, please. You're on mute, Bikesh.
It's just been 2 years working at home. What do I know? Okay. So my name is Bikesh. I run a ECF platform called Leap Capital. But we also have our own kind of private VC arm of the balance sheet. We invest into anything and anything with smart people in this country. So we've invested in some circular economies, green, by accident, because it does come to our platforms and say they're trying to raise, let's say 10 million, 7 million. The biggest issue we find that all these guys that are amazing businesses in green or circular, they don't know where to go. So maybe that's something, Mr. Government's listening right now, have that, just that simple thing, right? A playbook of who to speak to fundraise in green. These people are so focused running their business. If you ask them who's a PE firm you can go to, they have no idea. How they found me, because I'm everywhere speaking at a green conference when I'm not truly the level of you guys being green. But they show up to me and say, I just want to raise, and I heard we can crowdfund. I think Aaron did that. So he can speak about that experience, but it's not an easy experience. So one of the interesting things that came our way, we're going to do a biogas one, Datuk. I think it's part of your kind of council too. So that's a big one. We've got some people are looking at doing straws in this rice manner. That's nice. But the one I really loved, which I was so crazy that I put my own money into this guy, we invested into a factory. Our history is we're tech investors, but we found that there's a lot of potential in this particular family-run business for the last 28 years. They do manufacturing of furnitures, wood, not really plastics. But the kids who took over, it's like they have lots of kids. They have 10 kids. The kids are all educated overseas, came back, and they want to change how the family's been doing business. They wrote a 100-year business plan. Now, anyone who wrote a 100-year business plan is going to get my attention. And we helped them raise their kind of angel round of 3 million. And they want to raise 10 million next and then do an IPO eventually 3-5 years down the line. But what was interesting was the whole journey of him trying to figure out where to get funding. Great business, making money, but still people would say no to him. So I'll give you an example, right? So they produce really typical furnitures for beautiful buildings, interior decorations, tables, chairs, furnitures for school, etc. And then the off-cut pieces of that wood, he decides like, you know what? Why don't I go build something out of it? A typical furniture factory, and I don't really know the stats, I hear it's about 30%-ish in terms of waste. He's got it down to 5% already. His factory is now a tourist attraction. People around the world, except now, are trying to fly in and see how is this kid figuring out to get the 5% waste. He wants to go to 0%. Things like taking the shavings of the wood and becoming packaging materials so they don't have to use plastic bubble wraps, not using boxes to wrap stuff and using beautiful cloth or recycled fabrics, because that's also a circular economy you need to solve in terms of fabric, right? But, when he says, all right, I've taken my off-cut wood pieces and made a whole new product line, to me, it sounds like, wow, that's great, man. You're trying to reuse and recycle and all this stuff. But if we check into a typical investor who's not green, because I also don't know where to find these green investors, they go like, hey, man, that's a distraction. Now he's got to figure out how is he going to dispose of those items, right? Dispose as in sell. E-commerce, whole new brand ball game. Retail stores, whole new ball game. Does he have 3 CEOs to figure out online distribution, offline distribution, rather than just focus on producing furnitures and sell it as usual because he's already making millions there? Why are you doing all this? I think that's the typical thing SMEs face, right? They're so into their day-to-day right now, and you tell them go green, they go like, why? Unless there's a personal calling, and that's why they do it. If not, as Pramod said, it's the same thing we saw years ago when this whole green IT thing was kind of pushing the whole data center movement. Why should companies, infrastructure, data centers go green? It all came down to dollars and cents. You mean I don't have to buy more service anymore? I could reduce my cooling right now. Let's go virtualize service, then sign me up. I don't want to spend too much money. It wasn't about saving the planet, sorry. It's about the TCO, right? So you have these passionate people who want to raise, but they have nowhere to go, don't know how to do it. Even if you told him, find alternatives for your particular materials. Everyone here has been talking about the materials and raw materials. I think that's only a small subset of circular. They won't even know where to go. Have you made a playbook to say, here's a list of vendors, or even on the design, right? So many things with the plastic have ultrasonic bonds to metals. Are there going to be new ways to design such products? Where is the playbook of that? If you want Mr. SMEs to say, take away my 40 years of how my dad, my grandfather did something, and now I need to figure it out. How am I going to figure it out? So that's the brick wall when they come to us and say, beautiful stories, beautiful businesses, the kids want to take over and do something different. But the brick wall is, who do I go to write me my first check?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Bikesh. I met this family as well. And I found it very interesting that his main strategy, competitive advantage, the reason why he wanted to become sustainable was because he wanted to export. So he felt there was a growing demand abroad for sustainable furniture, and he wanted to be one of the key players to go abroad. So I think that comes to the bottom line is climate change is not a fad. I think the reality is it is not a trend. It's not a fad. It's a reality. The demand is going to become more and more specialist. People will want sustainable goods. If you're not sustainable, if you're not efficient in terms of your emissions, that is going to work against you as an organization. So from a demand point of view, that's going to affect you. From your assets point of view, as you see the shift in demand, shift in technology, you are going to end up with stranded assets. You're going to lose your competitive advantage to other countries that can do it cheaper, that are more nimble, who are willing to find, to invest in the innovation, to invest in the technology, to upskill their staff so that they can do that shift to meet the change in demand. On that note, can I invite Faroze? Faroze is the Executive Director of UN Global Compact Malaysia. Faroze, could you share with us, right, from your perspective, how the experiences in other countries and how Malaysia needs to actually, we have to actively put in place a mind shift. We have to see that it's no longer a nice to have, it's a reality, it's knocking on our doors, and we need to adapt. We need to either engage actively before it hits us too late.
Thank you, Zalina. I was hoping you'll call me last. I can just say I agree with everyone, but it's okay. I'm here representing the United Nations Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei, which is part of the UN Global Compact, which is the world's largest private sector sustainability movement with over 13,000 members. So we work with SMEs and corporates to accelerate the sustainability agenda. And I love the comments that's coming from the other speakers. Really pragmatic stuff. At the end of the day, we talk about innovation for green technology, circular economy. Our macro approach that finally we have a global shared vision of achieving a 1.5 degree pathway, and I think that's the common bound for all multi-stakeholders, whether your businesses or your NGOs. Everybody is now speaking towards that, and I think this is where we as Malaysian businesses need to understand that we can't escape this, right? From a private sector plug in, it will be from sustainable trade perspective. As Wendy has pointed out, low carbon sourcing is going to be the demand coming forward in the short or mid-term approach. As Pramod has pointed out, it's a price issue. It's a competitive issues. And when we compare where we are today with many other global players, I think one of the challenges from the Malaysian perspective is that we are a bit too tunnel vision about sustainability. We've always treated it as an environment role, and that's a challenge. And I really like the way Bikesh has promoted it beyond that, right? Actually, it's talking about competitiveness, it's talking about resilience, and it's proven in a COVID world, companies that is invested in being sustainable actually outperform their peers. Why? Because they're actually more innovative, more agile, more cost efficient. That's really the output from this approaches. So I think Malaysian companies need to first do one primary thing, and which was shared by Bikesh earlier. We've got to raise our sustainability ambition. I think that's the important bit. So the example shared by Bikesh was a clear example of how the next generation wants to raise their sustainability ambition. And this also, I think, pivots to the new demand about purpose, right? And I think this wherein lies the mindset shift that we keep talking about. I think first we have to be pragmatic. What when we talk about transformative shift, we're talking about culture shift. Now, what's a culture? Culture is a set of behaviors that is accepted by a group of people. And what drives behaviors is how we think and what we believe. I'm of the opinion that at the end of the day, it's very hard for us to break down the structures that pricing and financing will influence our decision making. But I think that's also the opportunity for us right now is how do we flip the side that if you want financing, if you want access to this kind of opportunities, you've got to be more sustainable. I think that has to be put in place. And above and beyond just a playbook about where people can come and raise money, we've also engaged large multinationals in Malaysia who are looking for sustainable suppliers. First, if you can tell me today so-and-so supplier who can supply to me certain PET, whatever it is, we'll buy it on the spot, but we do not know where to. So I think there's also an untapped matching between the smaller producers and the bigger buyers to create this whole ecosystem. But in that context, I also just want to share maybe 3 starting points for the Malaysian businesses when we talk about raising our ambition towards achieving a circular or ultimately climate-friendly economy. I think one, we have to be science-based approach. I think we have to be real about the commitments and the numbers that we make. Now, I say this with a selfish reason because UNGC is a co-founder of the Science Based Target Initiatives, but the SBTIs is developed based on solid research done by scientists, and it's based on a carbon budget. Every entity is only allowed to emit a certain amount of carbon before we hit a tipping point. And it gives you very clear numbers for you to look at. So when we talk about 2050, if we don't break down to a short to mid-term, it's still too far away. What are you going to do in the next 5 years? What are you going to do in the next 10 years? I think that has to be the driving curve. So, and SBTs or this set, if you want to talk about a well below 2 degree, or talk about a 1.5 degree, you've got to talk about 2.5 to 4.2% reduction per year. Now, when this is demystified, I think more people will understand and they'll get on board, and that culture shift will happen. And also, I cannot underemphasize in terms of importance of assured data, because right now we're all working on whatever people is reporting data, right? So if we take seriousness about P&L numbers and we say climate is as important, so where is the assured data for GHG numbers as well? I think that's also an important factor for us to look at. And finally, to your earlier points, and this is the whole of value chain approach. We can't, a single entity can't do it alone, right? When you talk about your scope 3, when you talk about your suppliers and whatnot, right? There's a very interesting research done by UNPRI and TrueCost in which they look at different industries. What is the contribution of scope 3 in terms of their climate footprint, right? When you talk about industries in utilities, very low, only 7%. When you're talking about manufacturing, it goes up to 70%. If you talk about telco, it's a whopping 95% comes from not your scope 1 or scope 2 or directly under your control. So how do you ensure everybody's on board as well? I think this has to be done that at the end of the day, everyone, every private sector, maybe even every stakeholder needs to understand that what is important in a sustainable trade world is beyond price and quality. You must also now factor in your ESG credentials. So if you're a big buyer to your supply chain, you have to ask them, what is your climate footprint for your product before I buy, for example? Now, if you're a consumer, for example, you're buying a house, do you go and ask your sales advisor, will the walls become so hot at 3 p.m., right? So I think we also need to ask certain questions as from a consumer level so that we can get the entire culture shift approach. Thanks, Zalina.
Thanks, Faroze. I totally agree with you in that front in terms of your last point, because we had a roundtable with property developers, and that was one of the questions we posed. How much of your demand is driven, how much of your property buyers actually demand for a sustainable building, and why don't you produce houses that are more sustainable? And the interesting comment that we got back was, let's say, for example, it increases the cost by about 100 ringgit per square foot to build a more sustainable house, but property buyers are not interested in paying that 100 ringgit extra. They want the most cost-efficient home, and it's a nice to have elements that reduce carbon emissions, but it's still not part of our culture. So I think it's good for us to say that MNCs need to change the way they operate, governments need to change the way we operate, finance needs to change the way it provides financing. But I think the key point here is all of us have a role. It's not only, it cannot be a top-down approach anymore. I think given the limited time we have, it has to be a bottoms-up. Everyone has to be moving in some direction so that we all meet in the middle and we're all going in the same direction in terms of carbon emissions. But two interesting points that Faroze mentioned is the reality is ESG credentials can become a competitive advantage today. And the way things are going, that is what we should all be aiming for, because that's what's going to put Malaysia on a different level relative to our competitors in the global supply chain. And two is, Dr. Nagu, everyone seems to be calling for a platform to connect the MNCs to the SMEs, connect the funders to the people looking for funding. That might be an interesting element to KASA's policy making. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Charlotte and once to tell me a little bit about climate circular carbon. And then we're going to have a proper roundtable where I'm going to ask a question and everyone can just jump in and answer. But before we do that, Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us. We're proud to announce that Charlotte is the head of sustainability for Petronas. She joined in June 2021, and we have decided to throw her to the audience of the Malaysia private sector, public sector, and the financial sector. And Charlotte, I wanted to sort of bring up a point that you had mentioned in our previous discussion, which I did a little bit of research and I found it very interesting, and I was hoping you could share a little bit on it in terms of circular carbon economy. So I did a bit of research because I didn't sort of fully understand it when you were mentioning it. So what happened was Saudi Arabia, which is an oil producing country like Malaysia, when it took over the G20 presidency in 2020, it introduced this concept of circular carbon. What can the oil industry do to contribute to the circular economy? And they came up with this concept of circular carbon, which I thought was very interesting and could provide another competitive advantage for Malaysia in the coming years. But like Arina had mentioned earlier, I think it is a concept that will only come in play in another 20, 30 years. But Charlotte, if you could educate us a little bit, please.
Oh, definitely. I'll try to do that. And thank you for the warm welcome. If I may just digress a little bit about furniture. So I relocated from London very recently. And I don't know if you relocated, especially moving countries, is quite cumbersome. And you kind of look at your furniture and go like, maybe I can live without that piece. It doesn't need to come with me all the way to Malaysia. So we had this one chest of drawers that we could bring back to IKEA. They did a quick inspection and we got a credit note for the IKEA store. So there we go, circular carbon or reuse in full action. But back to your question about circular carbon. So maybe if I could talk a little bit about it in maybe the context of Petronas. So if you start with reducing. So first of all, of course, you want to avoid emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So that is the first action for all of us. And in Petronas' case, there's a short-term target of capping CO2 emissions to 49.5 million tons by 2024. And this is really important. And there you have efficiency improvements and process improvements and all of these types of things that are really, really important. And just as we heard in the International Energy Agency report, efficiency is so important in general. So there's flaring, reduction, venting, and all of these things. And then if you move from producing, you can also have reusing. So you can actually use CO2 in enhanced oil recovery. And you were mentioning there, Zalina, Saudis and Saudi Aramco that have been very, very much supportive of this, and they're using it a lot and investing and investigating into it. There's actually a company in the US called Occidental that actually changed their whole business model. They are completely now in this EOR, enhanced oil recovery, carbon capture and storage business rather than producing oil. So they kind of were so into it, so they kind of changed they're now like a carbon management company. Otherwise, then you talk about recycling when you talk about circular economy. And here what's quite interesting is that you can actually, I think there's a lot of interesting things going on right now to see how can you recycle CO2. And here I would like to draw attention to one company that Petronas Venture has invested in called Solidia, which is basically using CO2 as part of cement production. And you can really, if you Google CO2 utilization, the sky's the limit. This type of innovation is everywhere now. So for instance, paints you can put on the wall that would absorb carbon from the atmosphere and so on. But of course, we need to go in the right order here, because first of all, we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reuse and recycle in the end. But if there's still carbon left in the cycle or circle, if you like, then you need to remove it. And here carbon capture and storage is very important. And this is also something that Petronas is now investigating and is planning to introduce the Kasawari Phase 2 project here in Malaysia. And if I may just add a little bit around, I think the first question, Zalina, you were asking is like, should we be focusing on circular carbon at the detriment of climate action? And then we heard also about business opportunities in this space. There's some really interesting developments in the North Sea right now, where, and I've been personally quite involved in this, where we're looking at the whole value chain of carbon from oil and gas production, and then to see which of those parts of the value chains actually can be commercialized. In which parts of those value chains do you need government incentives, for instance, tax incentives or other things, and where do you might need some academia and all these kinds of things. So hugely interesting, and it depends a little bit on the jurisdictions, but I would say we started this maybe 5 to 7 years ago, and now these are pretty close to market conditions as we can be. So there's a project called Northern Lights, which is led from Norway, where basically you will capture industrial CO2 emissions, chill them, transport them by ship to a processing facility off the Norwegian coast, and then re-inject it into reservoirs under the North Sea. And what's really interesting here is that you basically capture CO2 from steel production in France and Belgium and so on. And in the UK, there's a number of these types of projects now. And we heard from Arina about hydrogen value chains that actually, and there's one project that I have been involved in personally, which is called Zero Humber, where, and the Humberside is probably the biggest industrial cluster in Europe. And it's sort of an old industrial cluster. Some people would call it maybe the Rust Belt. And it's in north of England. But what's really, really interesting now, they're looking at basically decarbonizing the whole industrial cluster. So how do you decarbonize power production? So it's now moving from coal to biomass, and then bringing in hydrogen to decarbonize glass and steel production, and then ending up also with CCS. So you're actually creating a lot of new value chains, but it must be done together with society, academia, educational facilities, and so on, really to make sure that we can reskill and upskill human capital in any region where something like this would happen. But I would say at Malaysia also there's huge amounts of opportunity for something similar, because right now it's all about creating these new value chains, which is about economic regeneration and job creation.
Thanks, Charlotte. That's a very valid point. I think because of climate change, we're being introduced to so many new technologies that it's something that all the different stakeholders first need to understand the technology before we can figure out how to make it cost efficient and to mainstream it so that it becomes an an opportunity to raise revenue and to create jobs and stuff. So that's a journey I think Malaysia is very new and embarking slowly on. Thanks for that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out some questions, and anyone please feel free to answer them. What I'd like to sort of say...
Can I
yes,
just
promote, please.
Can I just add on to I think what Faroze said and
Sure.
Charlotte and a few others. One thing I'm realizing is that we're talking let's go green, but a lot of the green things actually came about from some ungreen things. Let me explain. When people went on or companies went on the digitalization and even for SMEs, a lot of banks funded the digitalization of SMEs, and we are all here able to talk about green because we have good broadband or 4G or computers are cheap enough for our companies to give us notebooks or iPads. So that has enabled actually this whole process for all of us to work from home, cars off the road, emissions down, clearer skies. In fact, I think there was a bank that talked about actually having the hybrid work environment on a permanent basis. And I think so what I'm trying to get at is, yes, part of it is a pricing equation, part of it is a policy equation, whether it's tax, part of it is about making it more competitive for SMEs to know that, they'll lose business if they don't buck up or move in a particular way. But there are actually some things that happen outside the green realm that actually made everything greener. So that's where maybe we should also think a bit outside the box, and maybe there are a lot of ideas that I think what Charlotte mentioned, that you're looking at different parts of the food chain or whichever industry we are in. There may be these digital moments. I'm paraphrasing that, but maybe the big wins lie outside just looking at the green. I just thought I would contribute that thought.
No, thanks, Pramod. And that's a great segue into what I wanted to ask you and Bikesh and put you both on the spot. So the general understanding or the general concept that seems to be out there is the problem is people are not getting the right type of funding. The problem is financing is not available. The minute someone comes up with a new technology, and you got to admit that green or climate change does involve new technologies. Not many players understand it. There's no secondary market. I think one of the questions that was raised is, what's the secondary market for solar panels? How do you recycle solar panels? And these are the issues that comes back to financing, right? How would the both of you answer the question that the problem is the financing sector? The financing sector is not recognizing that technologies in the green space are new and therefore it's a higher risk, but should be priced lower because it's contributing to a national agenda.
Okay, maybe I'll jump in first since I'm still warmed up. Zalina and everyone, I think more times that the feedback given is that I'm not getting this loan because I'm pushing this new green technology and so on. But if you look at it from a credit perspective, or you're sitting in the shoes of a bank, it's more other factors that actually are causing them to reject or make the loan process a lot more difficult. Perhaps I don't come from an FI, I'm just talking from a logical sense. They are looking at track record. And maybe the promoter doesn't have the track record. There may be other issues related to this project. Yes, one of it could be a technology that's not proven yet. And if you actually analyze the issues, sometimes it's not because they're not into renewable energy or not into something new. It's the credit fundamentals, and usually sometimes if it's a large GLC that is doing this project, and they have the confidence, maybe it'll go through. But maybe a new promoter that is coming in with no track record. Sometimes you see people in different businesses suddenly jump into RE. And, you know, for a bank, they'll look at it and say, hey, property developer now doing solar, you know. So sometimes there may be a disjoint, but maybe in Bikesh's space, they may look at it differently because, I mean, there's this issue of how traditional credit looks at things, and maybe the fintech world or the VC world has a more open mind. So it's not all about just the new technology, it's basically credit fundamentals.
Okay, so on that note, I think I found it very interesting last year or early this year. A lot of the non-traditional players suddenly became glove manufacturers given the COVID pandemic. Bikesh, what about the storyboard? Do you think the problem is they're not able to sell the story to investors?
Yeah, it's the main thing is the story, right? You ask them to tell their pitch of what they're doing. I think it takes them 3 days to basically tell them what is green and the history of their setup and all. So that's one. In fact, any SME now who wants to even fundraise or go IPO, the biggest issue is the equity story. No one knows how to tell stories because they never needed to. All they needed to was then just show their kind of invoices to the banks to show credit financing, project financing. I think that's what they can get. But now they're realizing that, you know, interest rates are kind of okay, but what if I had the ability to give out equity and still raise money for my projects? I think that's something we're doing with some of the biogas guys itself, saying, why not carve out a small piece of equity if you're doing so well? For the same amount, you would go to a bank and fund the next few projects that you had. That basically takes you even further. So I think that conversation is new. No one has come to them and told them about such things. That is one of the big issues. When was the last time someone knocked on the door and saying, hey, I'm Mr. VC, this is how I could basically help you fundraise? They don't knock on their doors. So that was one. And the other thing that we're hoping, the story that the younger people all want this affinity to the products they invest in. That's why, you know, although Bursa is doing well right now, but it's not the young people jumping on like, I want to buy CTOS, I want to buy Mr. DIY. Young guys have no affinity to any of these brands listing out there. But if it's someone like what we're trying to do with the factory, the green factory, it's exactly called the green factory, then they have a following. That's why I like how when they said the circular economy, their stakeholders involves where his factory is, the single moms and the refugees living around the factory itself, how he's figured out how to get them into his manufacturing process of saying that smaller wood pieces that he's working on to become handphone holders, etc., they take it back, they do the polishing and all those particular end things that he can. He's involved them all. And that story sells to the new investors, the young generations. So we're hoping a few green projects we're trying to put on our platform on ECF is going to get the next gen investors, the younger people, and I think they have access to funds. So it's a large volume game.
Thanks, Bikesh. So, Datuk, what is your opinion on what the financiers are saying?
Further to what Pramod and Bikesh was saying, talking from experience, actually, we started in biogas about 7-8 years ago. Initially, it was so difficult to get financing. Because whenever you go, I mean, I was a banker before, so I also understand their side. They need to see the risk factor. So the first thing they will ask, they see the viability of the project, the cash flow. And for them, at the end of the day, they need to be comfortable with all these, the technology that you are utilizing. Because at that time, about 7-8 years ago, biogas was something new. FIT was also at the infancy stage. But now, if you're talking about biogas, a lot of the technology are already localized. And secondly, what we had issue before getting financing previously was when you go to the bank, the financial institutions, they will ask you, who are your off-takers? Who are your suppliers? So, for example, let's say they are not comfortable. You don't have a continuous supply, or let's say you don't have a continuous off-takers. So, I mean, for them, it's a bit difficult for them to give the fundings. But in our case, because in Malaysia, biogas is always driven mainly by the FIT scheme by the government. So we have the PPA available. So it gives the credibility to our projects. Let's say you perform, the bankers, after you have commissioned maybe 2-3 plants, you are operating after a few years, then you have set the precedence. So for example, in our case, Zalina, what I realized, the first few projects before we started commissioning was very difficult to get the financing. We needed the government support at that time. We need, for example, the government, I mean, talking through experience, we received a grant from Teraju, MGTC gave, the MIDA gave the tax incentives, we MGTC have the GTFS scheme, all that.
We've lost sound, Datuk. We can't hear you. No, we can't. We can't. Could you get someone in your team to check your audio?
How about now, Zalina?
Perfect. Yes.
Oh, I see. Sorry. So when we first started a few years ago, it was so difficult to get financing because basically you have to prove your off-takers, your PPA, your continuous supply, but then, and also you don't have the expertise. But now after a few years, we have localized the technology, we have built up the credibility, especially after you have started commissioning, you have started operating. Then the financial institutions, they have more confidence in your operation, in your projects.
That's right. Thank you, Dato. So basically, Dr. Nagu, just a view, I think when you're talking about new technologies, new areas, I think that's the area that if the government could step in and provide that supportive, in addition to a facilitative framework, that supportive sort of helping hand in terms of grants or incentives, or even a platform to connect players. And if you focus those activities in new technologies or new areas that you want to push out, I think that would clearly be more helpful, as clearly it was helpful in the solar energy sort of sector. So now I'm mindful of the fact that we've quickly gone through the time and we have 15 minutes left. I'm going to open up 2 questions. I'm going to start off. I know everyone's got a lot of comments that you would want to say to Dr. Nagu, but I'm going to start off by giving Dr. Nagu an opportunity. Dr. Nagu, what would you like the private sector to do to push this agenda?
Right. Thanks, Zalina. I've been listening very carefully. When we speak about a platform, actually, we do have the Malaysian Green Tech and Climate Change Corporation, which has been there for quite some time. And actually, not being biased, but I think they've been very facilitative in matching people, bringing them to MIDA. In fact, HiGEM is purpose-built for that. HiGEM has been running for more than a decade. And this time we are doing it virtually, just like last year. And it's been very successful in matching people. And if you have any problem, just go to mgtc.my. I mean, they will try the best to help whoever to find the links. And they were running the GTFS, Green Technology Financing Scheme, like what Datuk Khairuddin said, which has helped many small and medium-scale industry make that leap, from the traditional processes that they have to make that leap. So that is something that we have. And of course, in terms of incentives, some people used to term Malaysia as a land of incentives. So we've got the GITE. So you go to mgtc.my, you can see GITA, which is for assets and for things that you buy, and GITE for services. So it's all there. In terms of the private sector, of course, I think one element that we really need, when many years ago, when I was doing cleaner production kind of work, I realized the small and medium scale industry needs that awareness. They've been doing these things like what Bikesh has said. It's been for generations. They've been doing the process. So why suddenly all this? So they need to see why they need to make the move. They need to be convinced why they need to make the move. And I think that kind of communication is not happening. Now the world is talking about IR 4.0. My interactions with some of the SMEs, jokingly, they'll say, "Hey, boss, I'm not even in IR 1.0." So I think that communication space, there's a vacuum. And here I'm looking at some of the big boys. Probably you could fill that void. And I'm very glad to know, like, you now got Corporate Governance Malaysia, you got CEO Action Network, and all these have mushroomed over the years. And I think the ESG is something that we can work on, but that's mostly for the big boys. So I think that communication space needs to happen. But I think something that's missing in our communication and in our discussion is we are always looking at the other side for technology. You know, Zalina, from my little experience, we've got enough ethno-knowledge systems that even the small industries can use. For example, you spoke about housing projects, right? You know, when Japan is embracing this whole Satoyama concept where rural landscapes, so the Malay kampung house, I always say, is the best climate resilient and friendly. You know, I used to live in one in the good old days when my father was in the civil service, where we used to have this kind of houses. So why aren't we looking back to ourselves for inspiration rather than looking at elsewhere? So these are some of the things. And my final point on how the industry could get together besides communication and all that is by, of course, we spoke earlier about market forces, about, you know, nudging and about facilitative instruments. But I think if people like, you know, we've got Maria now for the plastics, but and I think Ken and CGM and all this can bring these discussions to the board and to make these conscious changes. Just before I leave, there's a study recently published. If we do not do any action on climate change, if we just don't do any action, there'll be impact on the global GDP as much as 18%. And some countries like China will be about 24% of their GDP. But if we take action and try to meet the Paris targets of 2%, the impact on GDP is just 4% because, as you correctly said, taking action on climate change mushrooms all other kinds of economy. You know, so
that's right.
Right. And in our circular economic landscape in Malaysia, we did a study with Wolff-Bye. 81% of our material value of plastics, for example, is lost. 81%. And if this could be captured, it will bring in about US 1 to 1.1 billion back to the economy. So there are a lot of things here that we really need to work together. But I do agree that we need to create a whole ecosystem. For example, in plastics, right up from regulatory to the whole value chain. So I think that's the little sharing I will share now, and I'll pass it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you very much, Dr. Nagu. And on that last point, I think that is, if you scroll through the questions that have come in from the audience, I think that's a very resounding point that everyone is trying to put across, that it's the whole ecosystem. So we come up with national strategies, national commitments to the Paris Agreement. Let's go 30% or 40% reduce carbon emissions relative to GDP. And then we come down to incentives, right? But what about the middle bit? What about the ecosystem for effective landfills, for effective waste management, for effective, you know, I struggle with the issue that I focus on separating my garbage continuously with tremendous effort. But when the garbage collector comes, it goes all in the same truck and it bothers me, right? So on that front, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to put you on the spot, Dr. Nagu, because you are the only policy maker here today and everyone else is from the private sector. Can I call out Davis, Aaron, Faroze, Wendy, Charlotte? This is your opportunity to tell the government what you would desire today. If you could succinctly, please, because I only have 8 minutes between the four of you, if you could succinctly tell us what is your wish list for Dr. Nagu today?
Maybe I'll go first.
Yes,
I think I repeat my same message just now. I just hope that, you know, now we have cheaper, cleaner and clean energy. So we just need to have the policy to liberalize the energy and let the community, the industrial, the people in Malaysia to enjoy cleaner and cheaper renewable energy. And I'm sure that we can slowly make that happen. Of course, it's not one shot make it happen. That we need policymakers to show us that's the way that how policymakers want to do it.
Thanks, Davis. Aaron?
Yeah, so I mean, it all comes back to legislation or policies, just like everyone is saying. It doesn't have to be something that penalizes like a tax, or it doesn't have to be something, like that. So something like in New York, what they're doing now is Local Law 95. It's just a simple, like how we have the hygiene ratings in our restaurants that says your restaurant's at A, B, or C standard. Every public building and private sector building above 25,000 square feet has a rating in front of their building that is a motivator for them. Can you imagine if you walk into a 5-star hotel with an F rating, right? You will think twice. So there's many innovative ways to use legislation to move this conversation forward, and we hope that it's looked into.
Thanks, Aaron. Faroze?
Well, for us, I think you can also add in ESG credentialing as part of tapping government grants or incentive. I think that also spur the participation. And we must have a clear demarcation of the expectation of big corporates who are members of CAN and CGM and the SMEs who make up a bulk. I don't think it's not fair to brush everybody with the same stroke. Especially for SMEs, they need to be told how they can plug in so that clearly they can contribute as well.
Point. Charlotte?
I would say to be inspired by those countries and regulators who are really leaning into this agenda, because it's the signals that you're sending through policy that will really spur innovation. And that is so important.
Thanks, Charlotte. Wendy?
Yeah. No, I just want to chip in a little bit about how some large multinationals are really supporting these initiatives, right? I think they and maybe we can think about how to emulate this together. So they provide certain kind of like preferential status or preference of supply to this sort of suppliers. They give certain sort of rebates, preferential pricing. I've also seen a lot of them actually providing some sort of capital relief in terms of upgrading technological plants and machinery. So it's basically redirecting capital towards greener assets. And of course, I think the most important one is around the education and awareness, because the lack of data and the lack of knowledge of a lot of our suppliers today, or SMEs in Malaysia, would really affect the situation, and they really need some effective sort of energy efficiency strategy training around there. So I just wanted to speak a little bit about what I've seen, and then we can talk about how to do that together. I fully agree. It's everyone on the ecosystem actually plays a part. So yeah, that's where we are.
Thanks, Wendy. I think that's a very fair point. If all of you are online shoppers like myself, like Shopee and Lazada, they give discounts if you're double vaxxed. So, so if you got an ESG sort of credentials, let's give you a discount as well. Okay, we have 5 minutes left. What I'd like everyone to do is succinctly, in 30 seconds or less, what would be your last comment to this roundtable and your audience in terms of what you wanted to achieve from this roundtable and what you would like to see going forward? And I'm going to start from the top with Faroze.
I think we need to find the sweet spot between a business function, which is to make money. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And raise sustainability ambition. And that sweet spot is actually the business purpose. And I think businesses need to start to ask themselves, what is the purpose? And that will drive the culture.
Okay, we're going to rely on UN Global Compact to push that agenda to identify that sweet spot. Okay?
Yes, definitely.
Promote.
Okay, I've got 3 points.
30 seconds, promote.
Pricing, policy, and priority. We have to get all this done.
Great.
That's when it's going to change.
Thanks a lot, Promote. Datuk?
I think I agree with Promote. Support by the government, and thirdly, you can say free market, but it goes back to pricing. So that is how to move forward in this ESG.
Thank you, Dato'. Aaron?
Yeah. For me, it's just that people need to realize there's no quick fix to solve or to address sustainability. It's an ongoing journey with solutions like RE&E combined to deliver that.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Wendy?
Yeah, so further to earlier comments, I have to say that for the FI community, I think we will continue to be consistent, continue to apply rigor to how we manage risk, right? But the good thing is that we are actually looking
use the energy or reduce the carbon footprint. So every one of us, including the audience, you're gonna try to make yourself be the first one to change. Of course, biologically, who are the first one to change and who has the most impact is who's supposed to be
many different questions than we usually do.
Yep, it's the 3 bottom line issue. Yes, thank you very much. Dr. Nagu, you have the final say.
Thank you to the panelists for all this. Second is, I think business also needs to start thinking about extended producer responsibility. That's very, very important to think beyond that. I mean, it's always ended at the consumer level, but what happens beyond that? I know some big boys are already thinking of that. And my third point quite resonates with many of the panelists is behavioral change based on a planetary health concept. I think this is very important. I think we need to understand, and businesses need to understand, what happens to the planet at the individual level. And this narrative needs to take a bit more mainstream. And sometimes businesses feel they are in the bubble, just making profits all the time. They need to merge in a more mainstream agenda with this whole planetary health and behavioral change. With that, I too enjoyed myself and learned a lot from all of you all. Thank you so much. And terima kasih. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nagu. I think that's a fair point to close on this. And the thing is, this trend, this climate change phenomena, is something that will touch all of us individually. It doesn't have to make financial sense. It doesn't have to make economic sense. It doesn't have to make common sense. I think the reality is we're stuck with this. We need to fix it so that, we have a better retirement life and our children have a life, and we don't have a Blade Runner scenario coming forward. On that note, thank you very much to my panelists, and I really appreciate everyone's participation. And I will pass to you, Navina.
Thank you very much, Zalina, and thanks to all the panelists for that. We really wish we had more time. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. You would have received an email, or you will receive an email with a request for feedback, and we'll be very appreciative if you could send us your feedback for future events.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.